That would be good. I just hit start broadcast. If you could share your screen with that opening slide, that would be wonderful.
I think you have to wait for it to start. Okay.
Good morning, all. I'm John Powderly, the Grants and Public Outreach Specialist with FEMA Region 9. It's 9 in the morning, and welcome to our panel, Hazard Mitigation Planning, General Information, and Obtaining Technical Assistance. I should probably turn on my video so you can actually see more than just a picture. We have 3 great mitigation planning experts to speak with you today. First, we're going to hear from JoAnn Scordino. JoAnn is a community planner in the mitigation division of FEMA Region 9. She is also Region 9's lead for tribal mitigation planning. Next up will be Victoria LaMar-Haas, Program Manager and Local Mitigation Planning Chief with the California Office of Emergency Services. Then wrapping up will be Janell Woodward, Mitigation Officer with the Nevada Division of Emergency Management. What's my role? Well, I am just your friendly moderator. I'll be watching the chat for questions. Mentioning questions, please put them in the chat as soon as you think of them. We definitely want to answer your questions, but also be aware we're going to go through all of our presentations and then we will address the questions. We've worked our presentations in terms of time where we should have 10 to 15 minutes, maybe a little more, for questions after the presentations are complete. So that's what we're hoping for. If you type the question and you don't get an immediate response, again, we're waiting for after the presentations. We are watching the chat and we are going to answer your questions as best we can. So with that, I think you've heard plenty from me, and I will hand it over to JoAnn.
Hello, good morning. I don't see the PowerPoint on the screen. Is it visible to everyone else?
I don't see it either. I'm not sure who is sharing their screen, but it's not showing.
Okay. 1 minute.
Let's just take a quick minute to get the PowerPoint up, and then I will begin. Or should I go ahead and start?
1 moment, JoAnn. 1 second.
Okay. No hurry.
Do you see it now?
Yes. Thank
Okay.
you.
Let me get to where you need to start. There you go.
All right. Well, welcome. We are so happy to be here with you today, I am in particular. And I just wanted to give you our panel overview this morning. So this presentation today is geared towards tribes who've not yet developed your hazard mitigation plan, or as we've referred to, HMP, but also staff who might be new to hazard mitigation planning. But keep in mind, even if you've worked on your tribe's hazard mitigation plan currently or previously, there's a lot to a plan, And we think that overall, this is a good refresher. So hang in there with us. We welcome everyone's questions in the chat box, and we will address as many questions as we can at the end. Over the panel today, I will first be speaking on requirements for and the functional use of hazard mitigation plans. Then Victoria will cover the components of hazard mitigation plans, what goes into a plan. And then Janell Woodward will cover funding your plan and development and planning related activities. So that's what we'll be covering in this session. Next slide, please. And this is my part. Requirements for and the functional use of hazard mitigation plans. Next slide, Victoria. And why do a plan? What's the usefulness or the purpose of having a hazard mitigation plan? Where is, so to speak, the soul of the plan versus just putting words on paper or images on paper, but what's the real human value of having a plan? First and foremost, the plan that Victoria will cover is the planning process, where you actually engage your key tribal leads and your tribal community members. So by engaging, people are better informed. They learn, you elevate the level of mitigation and safety throughout your tribal community. Also identifying what your current local hazards. There are a multitude of hazards, and which are the specific ones that impact your tribal lands and community most directly. And then assessing your vulnerability to those hazards. If there's a major flood area that floods, but none of your tribal members live there or frequent the area, you're not as vulnerable as if you have your businesses and or tribal members living in that floodplain area. Also identifying your community's capability. Already have strengths that make you stronger and better able to respond. And then the next is identifying where those gaps are and developing and implementing actions that can reduce the risk to that hazard or hazards. And also, so vital and critical to all communities, but especially your tribal communities, protecting your cultural and resources and heritage from the effects of natural disasters. A hazard mitigation plan helps you better prepare for the long-range future for your tribe, your people, your environment, and your cultural and historical heritage. So there's real living value in having a hazard mitigation plan. Next slide, please. So I just want to give you, in my piece today, a quick snapshot and links to mitigation planning resources that are online and accessible for you. We have the Tribal Mitigation Plan Review Guide that covers the basic requirements of having a hazard mitigation plan, which, by the way, is needs to be updated on a 5-year cycle. We also have a fairly new, within the last year and a half or so, Tribal Mitigation Planning Handbook that is a companion to the guide, but it's a friendlier read and gives you a bit more ideas and resources of how to meet the basic requirements. So it's really well done, and I highly recommend it. There is also a mitigation plan review guide fact sheet that's 1 or 2 pages that just gives you the highlights of what's in the review guide. There's also 9 Tribal guide, and then we'll see the national review tool, which is what you use when you're developing your plan, and as meeting the key elements. In Region 9, we've broken it down a bit further so that it's less broad and more specific, so that the basic elements. So that is to you, and we highly that's necessary when you submit your plan for review to have a filled out review tool. FEMA has a mitigation ideas booklet, which is an older document, but it's very well done and can give you great ideas on projects, actions, things you can do. So it's well worth looking through. And then HMA, I'm sorry, we didn't spell that out. That's the Hazard Mitigation Assistance Division, basically the grants website. So if you go to that website link, you'll see available grants and open grant periods. So that's it for mitigation planning guidance. There is a ton of information out there. These basic ones, but please use the links. Now, next slide, please. And also, please, if this is your first plan or an update, or you're changing from a single tribe plan to a multi-jurisdictional or combined, these resources will support you through any of that. Okay, next slide. So if you need support with your plan, the state planners, FEMA planners, we are here to serve you and want you to know us and how to reach us for technical assistance. If you need direct one-on-one assistance or questions, do not be shy to reach out to us. I always tell people I've been a mitigation planner for 5 or 6 years now, and there's still a lot I don't know. So don't ever be shy. No, there is no question that's too small or too big to ask. We can help you, and if we don't know the answer, we'll point you to who can or might be able to. We also have training programs available. FEMA has a new independent study tribal mitigation courses, IS 350. Also, FEMA we are going to be leading a tribal webinar in Region 9 on November 16th at 12:30 p.m. We've got that link in here a little further down. So we do have trainings available. You can even request a training from us, and we have a lot of planning resources. Bottom line is we're here to partner with you and serve you, and reach out to us at any time. Thank you. That concludes my part.
JoAnn, I just wanted to say that there was a request for the links that are in the PowerPoint. So I think there's a way to download the presentation. See if I can figure that out.
We do have the presentation in there, and it's in a PDF. And we'll show you at the end of this presentation where all of the resources are that we talk about.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, JoAnn. My name's Victoria LaMar-Haas, and I partner with FEMA Region 9 and Janell over in Nevada quite often. We do share experiences and issues so that we can best serve all of our communities here. And today I'm going to go over some of the basic framework of what the elements of a mitigation plan are. Again, as I just mentioned, we do have resources that will go more in depth. So I'm just going to do a very high level overview so that you can get an idea of what those required elements are. And these are the elements that when FEMA reviews, or if we're helping you with technical assistance at the states, that we will help you to meet these requirements so you can have a successful planning process. So this is the basic components of the planning process, which is the first step when you begin your plan. The process, we always say, is as important as the plan itself. And that has to do with who you are identifying to come on to your planning team to make sure that you have all of your tribal community members, any neighboring communities or stakeholders. That may include anyone from, let's say, a neighboring county or a city, to even some of your utility companies that provide service to you for the tribe. So we want to make sure that you get a really comprehensive group together so that when you're sitting down to do this plan, they're helping you identify any gaps. They will also help on this next section, what we call the hazard identification and risk assessment. This really is the meat of your plan, and you will find that you can use this piece of your plan to help inform other plans that you have. This is where you're going to get your community members together and really look at what hazards do you currently have, what is the history on the tribal lands that you're planning for of past disasters. And during that, that's when you're going to consider like the priorities of them. Do you have more wildfires than floods, for instance? And we have a process and worksheets in the Tribal Mitigation Planning Handbook that'll help walk you through this whole entire process when you sit down with your community members. The next step in that process is developing your mitigation strategies, your capabilities, and your actions. And that the wording on this sounds more intimidating, really, than it is. What you're looking at is how can you, with the resources you have, look at mitigating for those disasters you just identified in that hazard assessment. Do you need personnel? Do you need to reach out and get some more training? Do we need to apply for grants? which honestly, the purpose of this plan is to make you eligible for those FEMA federal disaster grants. So that's where we want to get to. The mitigation actions that we've referred to here are really your wish list of the projects that you would like to accomplish for mitigation. So let's say that you need to update one of your water systems. Let's say it's not uncommon, say in California, for us to have wooden water conveyance systems, and they happen to be located, of course, in high wildfire areas. So we may want to look at that under your wildfire section as a possible action to go in and replace those to a fire-resistant material. So even though the wording here, again, is a little daunting, this is not as complicated as it looks. And again, we have some great worksheets that FEMA put together for us in that FEMA planning handbook, and we'll give you all the links to that at the end of our presentation here. And then, of course, implementation. Implementation is that next step. So if we go back to that water conveyance system, and we want to make sure that it is fireproof so that you can continue to deliver water on tribal lands. That may be in the implementation phase, you applying for that FEMA mitigation grant, looking at other community partners that may be able to help and other funding streams, and actually get that project built that you referred to in your mitigation action. So that's where we want to get to. We want to get to that implementation phase. So again, the picture I put up on this slide is actually the review tool, and the first page of it that we use to make sure that you've met all of the required elements that we're going over. And again, there will be a link to this on this presentation and in the document library for this panel. But in the planning process, we want to make sure that you're identifying your planning team. Again, I kind of went over this, but you want to make sure you've got a very comprehensive group of people participating in this that truly represent your community. And then any of your partners outside of your community that you think can help. We just mentioned a neighboring community, for instance. You also want to make sure you have your schools involved and the utilities. Some of our tribal governments have their own fire services. So you want to make sure that they're all coming in and bringing their ideas to the table. The more ideas, the better your plan. One of the things we will ask for is any of those community members coming in that participate, that you identify their roles and what kind of information that they provide to the plan. And it could be that everybody's playing the same role. And again, those worksheets we give you would help you walk through that. One of the other really important elements that we've been putting a lot of thought into on the state and federal level is this plan incorporation. What kind of information are you pulling from your other plans to use to help inform this mitigation plan? And then later on, you'll see we're also going to want you to tell us, what are you going to take out of this plan to help inform other plans? Usually that's that hazard identification and risk assessment, because you've put so much work into that with all of your stakeholders. You should be pulling that out and using it for some of your other planning efforts. It also ensures you have some consistency throughout your other planning documents. We talked a little bit about your stakeholders and your public involvement. Stakeholders may be at the table during that planning process, but how are you letting the public come in and either provide input in the drafting of this plan, or on the other side, give comment once you have a draft done? Your public and your tribal and community members are your best marketing strategy for mitigation. And the more you can educate them and have them understand that they have a voice in these mitigation measures and in this planning, the more successful you will be. And ultimately, the easier it will be to implement any of these actions. And then finally, the plan adoption. This is once you've gone through the reviews with FEMA. We're going to ask that your tribal government do a formal adoption of that plan. And the reason we do that, it's really demonstrated commitment on your behalf to mitigation and that implementation phase, so that you recognize your hazards, you know we may have an issue, and let's get a plan together to see what we can do to help lessen those threats should a disaster hit. The hazard identification and risk assessment, as I mentioned, is really, really the meat of your plan. There is so much effort and work that goes into this section. It's really important at this time that you have an idea of what your disaster history is. That is a common thread when developing this. And that's where some of your partners, maybe on your county or a local city, may be able to help you gather that information. And FEMA and your state partners certainly can assist on this as well. We also want to make sure that you're identifying your community assets. And by that, we want to look at people, structures, systems that are in your community and that could be vulnerable once a disaster hits. And then following that is assessing those vulnerabilities and impacts. Could a flood, for instance, impact a transportation route for you? So those are the things we want to look at. And again, the more people you get involved in this planning process, the more ideas that can come to the table and the more things that you can think about for this section as possible vulnerabilities and impacts from that disaster. And then lastly, on this section, we want you to prioritize those risks and vulnerabilities. So you may have a higher number of wildfires than earthquakes, say. And so when you're looking at those different types of hazards, you're going to put wildfire up on the top of that list. And it should be taking into account the other things that we've spoke about, your population, your assets, and then your other vulnerabilities and impacts. And that should drive that prioritization. But again, I'm doing this very high level, and we have worksheets that'll help you walk through this. So please don't be intimidated by so much information, because we are giving you a lot here, but it is intended to just kind of give you a taste, an overview of the types of things we're looking for when you're doing a local hazard mitigation plan for your tribe. The next section that's included here in the planning process is your strategies, capabilities, and actions. So when we talk about assessing capabilities, we want to know what you're able to bring to the table. Again, do you have funding? Do you need funding? Do you need training? Do you have the personnel that could help you play out these mitigation actions and really work with tribal officials and community members to get the word out and get more ideas flowing in about where you could take this plan and what types of mitigation actions you can do. And from that, you can start to develop your mitigation goals. What do you want to achieve? Do you want to become more fire resistant? Do you have some structures on your tribal lands that maybe need seismically retrofitted because you have an earthquake hazard? And then we want to look and evaluate possible mitigation actions. And JoAnn referred to the Mitigation Ideas book. That is probably my favorite publication that FEMA puts out because they do organize potential mitigation actions by disaster type. So you can open the section for flood and look at potential mitigation actions, and you can use those either to stimulate a conversation among your planning team, or you can lift those right out of that mitigation actions book and start developing a possible mitigation project. So it's an invaluable publication. And again, we did link it to this presentation so you have direct access to it. And then when we talk about preparing an action plan, the whole entire tribal mitigation plan really is that action plan. If you think of this a lot like following a strategic planning process, it's a lot easier to kind of take the plan to the next level. It really is a 5-year plan for you to address your hazards and then hopefully take some actions to help lessen the threats of those hazards on your tribal lands. And then finally, this plan is a living document. That's one of our favorite things to say. So one of the requirements we're going to ask you to do is how are you going to maintain this plan? We really suggest that you pick a date every year, whether it's July 1st or August 1st, and that you have someone that is in charge of pulling that plan out and maybe getting your team together, whether it's an in-person or a conference call, to go over any changes. And when we look at changes, we're looking at things. If you had a new disaster, were you able to accomplish a mitigation action that maybe turned into a project? Do you have some new mitigation actions and ideas for projects based on disaster history or things going on in the world that you may not have thought about could affect your mitigation plan at the time that you did it? One of the things we always like to make sure everyone thinks about is a plan traditionally takes a little bit over a year to do. So things have changed by the time you submit it to FEMA and go through the review process. So there's, maybe 2.5, sometimes 3 years of a gap between the information that you put down in that plan to the time that it gets approved. So we want you to be cognizant of that. And then how are you going to continue to get the public's involvement and their comments on this plan? Do you take it to a tribal safety fair? I had a great plan come in a few months ago that they had regular safety fairs, and this is where they would take the local hazard mitigation plan and talk to the attendees about different safety and mitigation measures, and they use that information to help update their plan. And then other considerations for plan updates, just like I had just mentioned. Have you had a new disaster? Are there other things such as the pandemic going on that maybe weren't as prevalent the last time you did your plan that you want to look at and incorporate? And then finally, we do have the implementation of your plan. And the reason we're going to implement this plan, of course, number one is to protect the members of your tribal community and maintain your public safety. Absolutely look at protecting your cultural and historical sites. And what I don't have here is also the environment. That's very important to all of us, whether we're looking at climate change or the effects of a flood on land that is needed for farming or other uses in our community. And we absolutely want to also look at preventing additional damage to our community assets. And this all in turn will help reduce the costs of disaster response and recovery. And then improve your local capabilities, because you will be able to have a complete assessment of what you have in-house to deal with these disasters and where you may need to grow in future years. And this mitigation plan can help you think through that, especially when you make sure that you have all of your stakeholders involved. And then, of course, we want to always encourage safe and sustainable growth. That helps not only maintain our public safety, but it really will protect your cultural, historical sites and your environment. So that's it for me, and I will turn it over to Janell.
Good morning, everyone. I want to talk to you just for a few minutes about mitigation funding opportunities and assistance. Next slide, please. So what are some of the ways that you can fund up or either creating a plan or updating your hazard mitigation plan? And those include grants and local revenue, loans, some technical assistance from either FEMA or the state, in-kind services and materials that you yourself are able to provide, or somebody else working with you can provide. And then, of course, public and private partnerships where you can bring in outside agencies that have been spoken about before in this presentation to work with you in developing that. Next slide, please. Some of the different opportunities that are out there are the HMGP grants, which are the post-disaster grants. And so that may be if the tribe would go direct to FEMA in a declaration, then you would be able to use that funding for that. If you were going through the state instead, you would go through the state for grant of that nature. Next is the Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities, or the BRIC program. And this replaced the prior PDM, or pre-disaster mitigation program, and this was first started in fiscal year 2020. And in this case, there is a direct set aside for all of the tribes, states, territories, or federally recognized tribes, I should say. And so you want to be sure and use that if that's something you would like to do, because you are only competing against the other tribes, not the national competition that the rest of us do. But, you know, use that set aside. There's a certain amount that can be used for planning activities or planning. And this year, that's $1 million for everybody. So that's a good amount to do some projects as well as doing planning. Next is the Flood Mitigation Assistance, or FMA program. And that's going to be connected to whether you have your community is involved in the NFIP, or the National Flood Insurance Program. So there is planning assistance there. And then, of course, I want to direct you to the FEMA Grants and Training Panel that's tomorrow, the 21st at 1 p.m. And FEMA will be discussing the grants and training there. So that would be a great resource for you to drop into. Next slide, please. Finally, I want to give you some examples of the different projects that are eligible in the Hazard Mitigation Assistance Funding, or HMA. You can do infrastructure projects, which might be acquisition and demolition, or soil stabilization. You might need to purchase a generator, and of course, including some nature-based solutions. Planning activities, that's your hazard mitigation plan, or planning related activities that would be maybe some studies or something that needs to be done that would influence your hazard mitigation plan development. There are also 5% initiative projects within the HMGP those are projects that are difficult to come up with a BCA, or benefit cost analysis for. So those might include warning signs or notification systems, can include your public outreach to your community about different hazards. And finally, there is technical or advanced assistance. In BRIC, advanced assistance is called project scoping. And then there are management costs as well that would help cover your costs for managing your program. Some examples might be your H&H study, hydrology and hydraulic studies, architectural or engineering designs for things that you want to do, and also putting together the benefit cost analysis. So you can hire a contractor to do that if you don't have somebody available on staff to do that. And then I just wanted to mention here that any of these projects outside of a funding to actually put together a hazard mitigation plan require that you have a FEMA approved hazard mitigation plan before you would apply for the projects themselves. When you apply for a grant to do your hazard mitigation plan or update, you do not have to have a previous plan in place, because you're applying to develop that now. Next slide. I think this goes over to JoAnn. So thank you very much.
Hi. Thank you. So the next slide, really, we've already gone over some of these resources in the previous slide, the Tribal Planning Handbook, the review tool, did want to let you know that there's also a fact sheet on how to choose a planning contractor or consultant for or update. So it's just some basic tips about choosing a contractor who will really help facilitate your process and guide you through the process and pull together your materials. Earlier, that FEMA has a newly updated independent study, IS Tribal Mitigation Planning course. It's IS 350. You can find it online. The FEMA and state planning liaisons like myself, Victoria, Janell. In Arizona, you've got Lucretia, Lou, or Sue Austin, and we are here to assist you and serve you. No question is too small. Really, it's our job. And we all are juggling many different competing demands, and especially with heightened disasters of late. But that aside, we are here to serve you. So contact us anyway and at any time. Next slide. So we have events. There will be the FEMA grants and is today the 21st? No, tomorrow. Tomorrow, Thursday, October 21st at 1 p.m. And there will be a grants and training panel, and that's not to be missed. There's so much grant funding available right now, and our grants staff really have the knowledge, the resources, and the tools to guide you. So don't miss that if at all possible. Also, FEMA Region, myself and a team, including our National Preparedness Regional Tribal Liaison, Chris Pillman, and others will be presenting with us for a tribal mitigation planning webinar on November 16th, which is a Tuesday, at 12:30. It will go from 12:30 to 2. We've embedded a link here. If you hit that link, it will take you to an Eventbrite page where you can register for. And we welcome you to be there. We will go through a bit more thoroughly the whole planning process and then allow time for questions and answers. So please join us if you can on November 16th. And that webinar will also be recorded and eventually be up on the FEMA YouTube channel. Next slide. We want you to know how to contact us. So my information is available here, my phone number and my email address, as is Victoria's and Janell's. So don't hesitate to contact us. And just a quick reminder, if you're ever contacting me at least, but I think I can speak for all of us, if you ever contact us and something's timely, please say so in the subject line. And if you haven't heard back in a timely manner, do not be shy about calling or emailing again. Sometimes I get behind or miss emails, and I wouldn't want to not respond to something that's important to you. So don't be shy about tracking me down or any of us if you need assistance. We are here to serve you and to partner with you. Next slide. Questions. What questions do you have for us? You can put them in the chat, or can they come off of mute?
Unfortunately not. So yeah, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box.
Thank you.
JoAnn, Victoria, Janell, thank you, all three of you, very, very much. As Julie-Ann said, sadly, the attendees cannot unmute, but they can provide questions and comments in the chat box. We've had the one question regarding the links, and we've answered that the links are live in the presentation. And so the presentation has been uploaded to the Accelerants website under this breakout session. So that's accessible to all the attendees. And I think all the people who attended the conference, not just the people who attended this breakout session. We're waiting for questions if you have any. If not, then we'd be happy to give you back, 3 or 4 minutes of your day.
I would like to just make one more comment to reiterate what we've said throughout the presentation. But whether you're brand new to hazard mitigation planning, or you're working on an update, or you're a seasoned planner, that's us, because we really are here to support you. Looking for questions.
Yep. Well, here we have one. Wonderful. Here's two. Excellent. Okay. Cindy Smallwood asks, which would be better to go through for funding a hazard mitigation plan, the BRIC funding or the HMGP funding? I am going to ask Janell to make comment on that first.
I think that your best bet probably would be the BRIC funding, because it is directly set aside for your tribe. As long as it's a FEMA federally recognized tribe, you can use that set aside, and there's a certain amount that's allowable for planning specifically. So the HMGP, you just never know when you're going to have that, but BRIC is an every year thing.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'd like to add to that. I completely agree with Janell, and also apply for whichever is available. And it apply for both, correct? I mean, if there's an open grant period, seize the opportunity.
I would agree with that.
And
JoAnn, I was
Victoria,
just going to say, in California, because we've had so many disasters, we have a lot of HMGP funding. So when the questions was asked, I was saying, yes, apply to everything when it's available. But California has been having a lot of disasters. So there's a lot of HMGP funding available in addition to the BRIC. So I encourage you to apply on both there.
Thank you all. And then a very related question that JoAnn was alluding to. Pam Overman asked, is there funding to develop a hazard mitigation plan? My guess is yes, all three. I'm seeing all three nods. Yes, Pam, there very much is funding to develop hazard mitigation plans.
And there's also funding for updates. So, and this is my personal bias here. Apply for support with your plan to write your plan or update your plan. But most of all, really look at opportunities and projects that you need funding, because that's what's going to ultimately make the biggest difference. You can keep getting money to update your plan, and that's a beautiful thing. But where you really want to focus ultimately on project funded that will actually make your environment and community and people and safer. So there's money for all of those.
Folks, I'm looking at the timer, and it appears that we are a little bit over time. Thank you very much to the attendees, JoAnn, Victoria, Janell. Thank you very much for the information you've passed on. JuliAnn, thank you also very much for providing the technical assistance and the moderating assistance. It was fantastic having you help us out. To the attendees, please download the documents that we've uploaded to Accelerants under this breakout session, and feel free to contact any of us with your questions. Thank you very much. And JoAnn, go ahead.
See, Sydney had a question. Is there a list of approved consultants for working on HMPs? We cannot recommend consultants. That is outside of our scope of accountability, but we strongly advise you to reach out to your local communities, your tribal partners, and ask for their, or do some research on the consultant you're choosing. That's really important. Okay.
I've also uploaded the fact sheet, JoAnn, that FEMA provides on how to hire a contractor. And I really suggest you take a minute. It's not a long sheet, but there's some very important tips on there.
Very good. Melissa asks, and my thought is let's keep going until someone says we have to stop. Melissa asks, are there any other rural communities experiencing lack of resources in the area? I don't know if panelists, if we want to address that, or if that's maybe something for the attendees to connect with Melissa.
I would like to just say most rural communities experience a lack of resources. That's a pretty broad question, but in general, but there are also so many resources available for rural communities within the federal, state, local communities. So a lot of it resourceful and connecting with others and partnering and finding out where there are resources. It helps too if you can be real clear about what your needs are and where the gaps are and what can make a difference. But I hope that answered your question.
Are there any other questions, since we apparently can go a little bit over time? So if there's any more questions, please. Seeing none, thank you all very much. Again, to the attendees, please feel free to connect with any of us using the Accelerants or Accelerants Software Connect feature, or also the contact information is provided in the presentation. We very much want to do what we can to assist you to get good hazard mitigation plans. Thanks all, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.